I'm not kidding, Annie. I tell you, back in my 20s, we didn't really talk about mental health. If you're having a bad day at work, you just head to the loo, have a good sob, or you could go around the block and have a cigarette and then get back to your desk and pretend everything was all right. Oh, hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast.
Too Young for This, Too Old for That, a podcast where two generations meet in conversation. And today we're going to be exploring therapy and self-help in today's world. And we want to say a very big thank you to our sponsors, Wilfred's, the non-alcoholic aperitif reinventing the spritz, and you can shop on Ocado and Amazon.
So, Annie, I wasn't really joking when I was talking about mental health just then. It feels to me as though when I look back, we didn't really know anything about mental health back in the 90s and even in the early 2000s. But for your generation, things are completely different.
I mean, yeah, I think particularly after COVID or during COVID, we all became more aware of our mental health. And I think there's been a huge shift. And now it's, a very open dialogue, which I think is great. And it's changed a lot. So the idea of you, crying in your toilet cubicles, I mean, that would never fly with HR today. So do you think healing is like the new hustle? There's business ventures that have grown out of it. People are now, talking about it in day-to-day conversations. Do you feel like it almost becomes a little bit of like an admin task working on yourself?
It feels like it, doesn't it? As you know, I work in wellness. And I work specifically in my clinics with people with chronic back pain, which is a whole different area, but also really relevant to an idea of struggle and struggling with what's going on for you on a daily basis. And I do wonder whether, at the same time as seeing people who have genuine issues and genuine problems in their life, somehow when I open my Instagram feeds or, any type of social media, there's just somehow this sense that self-improvement is a to-do list. You've just got to be working on yourself in all regards, and especially with your mental health and your physical health all the time. Does it feel overwhelming?
It can feel, I think it's interesting you say this because I think it can feel like a vicious cycle. I don't know whether you get this on your algorithm, but particularly when I was at drama school, it used to be a thing where you see people's morning routines of how they improve their self, and they'd wake up at 5 a.m., go to the gym, and then they'd meditate, and then they wouldn't check their phone, and you just feel like, God, I'm almost like, what's the point? I've already started my day in a disastrous fashion. And, so there'd almost be this huge comparison. So these people who are posting things with good intentions, it can almost feel a bit like, oh, great. Like, I'm screwed. Like, I can never do that.
I've already failed before I've even got out of bed. Yeah, so there's the pressure from outside. And then I suppose the biggest difference I'd say I see is that this sense that everyone has mental health now. And the truth is everyone does have mental health, right? But we want it to be healthy. And somehow mental health, just those two words, has become a diagnosis. What do you think? Does that push your buttons, me saying that?
No, it doesn't, because I think over the last year, I've worked to kind of view your mental health and your mind as almost a little bit like you would a limb, if that makes sense. Like if I have an arm, I might break my arm one day, and that's going to hurt, and I need to repair it. So I think actually if we're aware of it and we treat it like it is, something that is holistic, but also something that is medical as well, a little bit, it actually breaks the taboo. And yes, we all have mental health, but some days, you might need to put a little bit of a Band-Aid on it. And you might need to put it in a cast, and you might need to help it a bit. I don't know whether that makes any sense, but I don't see viewing it like that as a bad thing. I think actually if we just acknowledge it and normalize it, I think it will help people feel less taboo about it.
I think that's fabulous. And I think that's exactly right. And without this episode being all about my work, obviously I'm a yoga practitioner as well. And I, work on all levels of the human self, and seeing the mind and body together, I think makes total sense. So is it is there less, there was a taboo, I'd say, back in the old days of feeling or acknowledging that you were struggling mentally with something, that you were feeling low or that you had anxiety. I get the sense that's not the case anymore. What do you think?
Well, this is what I wanted to kind of dig into today is that I think very much now it's very much out in the open. And I think that's fantastic. You can go for drinks with your mates or coffee and you can go, how are you? And go, actually, well, I'm not 100 or whatever. And you can talk about it. And it's not, no one's going to judge for that. Well, hopefully not, at least. But so that's changed and it's on social media. But for you growing up when you were 23, I'm assuming it was completely different because I've even noticed a shift in my own generation, like across my teenagehood. I've noticed it become less stigmatized. So what was it like when you were, going from school to uni to work, kind of around my age?
I think we didn't have the language or the understanding of mental health is probably how I would describe it. And I'm not talking about people who would have had diagnosable illnesses or would have needed, extra help at that point. But certainly growing up, I mean, outside London, in my teens and 20s, there would never have been, I don't think I ever knew anyone that had done therapy. I'm very fortunate. I didn't know anyone with an eating disorder. I don't think I could recall any one person who would have had a named condition or would have admitted to struggling. I guess is really, really different to now.
That's completely different to now. Completely different. Because now it's so much more in the open. And yeah, sorry, that blows my mind a little bit. Because I think now it's like it's such an open dialogue. And I think I obviously work, I think, in industries that I think that is something I've got to touch on. I work on industries that are quite open, like, the acting, creative industry. They're very kind of like, will hold you with open arms. I was talking to my, like family about this, it's very much like, no, we'll talk about it in our industry. It's an open thing. Even in the school education world, they want to talk about it, learn about it so we can support students and, staff as well. And so that does blow my mind a little bit. So the people I surround myself with tend to be very switched on to their mental health. But yeah, that's wild to me. Do you feel the same as me that you noticed a shift post COVID? When do you think you started to like become more aware of your own mental health and like
Oh, well before COVID. I mean, well before COVID. What I would say though about going back to that time at school, if that's okay, is that, at the same time as saying I didn't know anybody with a diagnosis or, I didn't know anyone that was on the face of it struggling very deeply, we all had our ups and downs, right? We all had fights with our parents, people had relationship breakdowns or breakups, and everything is more you know, volatile, isn't it, when you're a teenager or early 20s and you've got your hormones and stuff. But I think pretty much the prescription was go home, lie in your bedroom, shut the door, put on a new album, listen to Depeche Mode because they were, considered to be miserable, and cheer yourself up like that, right? Or just works through it, or sits with it, gets through it. I don't think we've had the language or the understanding to delve into it much more than I'm feeling miserable, right?
I think I think language is a very interesting thing to use though, because I think on one hand you're saying in your generation you guys still struggled with it but just didn't give it like a title or a name. Whereas now we do give things like a title or a name, and that's great because you can get diagnosed with things. But also it can be quite scary and intimidating for people, I think. Like giving it like a almost a headline. You're like, oh my gosh, I now have this, I now have that. It's very helpful, obviously, but I think people can find it quite daunting. And I do think I listen to a lot of, you didn't watch the Traitors, but like Joe Marler, who was on the Traitors, this big rugby England player. And he talked really openly about his mental health, which I think is fantastic because this big, like rugby man. But I think, he spoke a little bit in a podcast about, how it is scary going to like get this like title almost, but it obviously is helpful. So I think that is a big shift between then and now. It's not that people weren't struggling with it, it's just we didn't give it a name.
Yeah, and I think I think that's definitely true. And I think naming it and bringing these things out into the open are awesome. I suppose as an older person now looking back or looking at the landscape in which we find ourselves, and this might not be a popular opinion, I do wonder whether labeling things or giving them a name gives them more power. So the difference between, you know, feeling a bit miserable and lying in your room listening to like the Smiths or Depeche Mode or whatever for, for 3 days on loop. I just wonder whether there's a sense for or a need for everything to be good all the time. But we back to that.
Yeah. Well, the difference between like low moods and finding things hard and then actually going, I have this. Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And the nervous system, again, therapy, Angie's therapist hat on. The nervous system needs downtime and time to rest and, recover as well from negative things that happen to us and, getting us back on our feet.
You need to process. You need to process, and you're going to feel the joys, the highs, and the wonders of life. And you're also, but being a human being and having the full human experience is therefore experiencing the really low moments as well. And it's about how much it's about the balance there. That's where I think it can really. That's where it gets interesting.
So, Annie, if you don't mind us getting a little bit more personal, have you had any times in your life where things haven't been quite as good as you've wanted them to be?
Oh, most definitely. Like, I know I was just talking about the full human experience there, but like, there's definitely been moments where it's been really hard. I consider myself very lucky in life and I've had a good life. But I think, I've definitely struggled with my mental health in the past. I think, I turned 18 in the midst of a pandemic, which I think's very weird. And I don't think I know people call my generation the snowflakes, but I don't think people give them enough credit for, going through your quite early, formidable adult years in a lockdown. That's hard. So yeah, it took a toll. I then was also going to drama school at the same time. That's quite another big layer. And I ended up, struggling a little bit with some food issues, had a little bit of a funny pattern with eating, but I worked on that. And, I got the help that I needed. I had a wonderful coach and, but that was a very dark time. And I also had wonderful parents to support me through it. And then I got through drama school, had a good time. And then I found my kind of journey with it, I found leaving drama school hard. I went through a big breakup and that didn't manifest in the form of food, but it definitely made me, for the first time, I struggled more with anxiety and low moods than I ever had before. So yeah, I think it's scary to sometimes say that out loud, but I also think you can't talk about like, be open and talk about breaking the stigmas if I'm not a little bit honest myself.
So, listeners, I can see Annie as we're recording this, and there's a little bit of awkwardness right there, which I haven't seen before. How do you feel about talking about this out loud?
I think, it makes me feel ironically quite nervous and also like very emotional, I think. Because I think it's like if you almost acknowledge, not this is what I mean. Sometimes even though I have acknowledged it, but if you almost like say it out loud, that can be really quite daunting. And I think I'm also very, and I mean this quite genuinely, and I don't think we say it enough about ourselves, but I'm very proud of how like where I am now and how far I've come. Like, and I think I'm very much okay with like saying that. I think especially in British culture, we're like, oh God, don't say you're proud of yourself. Don't have an ego. But I think in terms of my own personal growth, I'm really proud of like that. I've taken my mental health into my own hands, and I'm responsible for it. I have a really good friend, and he said to me, he was like, your mental health isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I know Dan, he's amazing. He won't mind me naming him because I think he should write a book. But he said, and it completely changed my mindset on it. It's not your fault if you're feeling like this, but it is your job to take hold and accountability of it. And I'm really proud of where I am now. And I think it's okay. Like life. I remember actually someone showed me this recently. I might, maybe I will put it on Instagram, but she showed me a graph, and it's of a wiggly line going up, and it's that life is gonna go up and down, and you're gonna have great moments, but it's, and it's always gonna be okay in the end, but it is gonna have your wobbly moments, and that really has changed my perspective. So yeah.
So we're not in the same room today. Sometimes we record together, sometimes we record from each of our locations. And I'd say both of us had a little teary moment there, or close to a teary moment, when Annie was talking about coming through periods that I think might have been a bit more difficult than she just mentioned. I think if we'd been together, we would have had to have broken the recording and had both of us had a big cry and a big hug.
Yeah, I think that's the first time I nearly cried on the podcast.
Yeah, I've got tears in my eyes listening to you saying that. So thank you for sharing that.
No, it's fine.
Really, it's brave to be able to talk about things. And I think it's interesting that even though we can say that it's not a taboo and it's not, there's no stigma attached to it, I think sometimes putting ourselves out there in this sort of environment is clearly, it's just another step.
It's really vulnerable.
Yeah, makes you feel vulnerable. So that drawing that you just drew, which was a graph of a wiggly line, we'll put it somewhere in that you can see it. That sort of really chimes with me in terms of over the last few years, I've spent a lot more time studying spirituality and delving more deeply into some of the yoga philosophies. And I've been a yoga practitioner for 25 years and a teacher for 15 years. So spend alongside my osteopathic and clinical work. Really always strikes me that the Eastern traditions, in particular Hinduism and Buddhism, start from a different viewpoint, right? They start with this sort of acceptance that life is suffering, which is going to sound really bleak, and I'd be interested in what you think about that in a moment. But that life is suffering, the human life is suffering. You're born, you come out crying for starters. You come out crying. And then, you've got to study, you've got to work, you've got to put food on the table, you've got to navigate illness, loved ones passing away. And then in the end, we get old and we die, right? So, but the tools that they give us through the practices of mindfulness and movement and all the other things, they're the things that help you navigate those ups and downs, right? Whereas in the West, there's a different sort of sense, isn't there, that actually you should be having a good time all the time. And for me, I think that's what I really feel is difficult for us, all of us, in a world where social media is just pushing out this.
Literally, I personally, I think I really chime with that philosophy, because I think it takes the pressure off. If you're constantly working towards this, everything's going to be perfect and it's going to be dandy. I don't know why I'm American there, so sorry. But gosh, but I do think it's going to set you up for a fool. Whereas if you spoke, when we were chatting before a little bit about acceptance, do you think, if you don't mind me sharing, how has that helped with your own mental, with you on mental health journey? Have you found this kind of mindset? Has this really chimed with you? If you don't mind delving into it, have you found this philosophy affect your life?
In the last few years, one of my close family members, well, two of them actually, were diagnosed with cancer and had to go through quite extensive surgeries. In one case, quite life-changing surgery. My best friend died. My immediate family had various health things. One of my sons had a football tackle went wrong and ended up with 3 surgeries. So it's been quite a tough time. And I suppose as someone who through the years has had various bits of therapy for different things, and has taken medication in the past, I think this idea of acceptance and having something to fall back on has been a really big support for my mental well-being. And I've been surprised and astonished, probably would be a better word, at how I've managed to navigate this time without falling over.
Yeah. And I think that's well, first of all, like, thank you for sharing. Again, like, I think that's a very beautiful thing. And it's very vulnerable sharing that as well. I think, a little bit like what Angie said to me. We can talk about like breaking taboos and talking about how it's more open, but actually, sometimes when you say things out loud in one breath, it can be quite heavy.
Yeah, and knowing that that other people that I don't know possibly are going to be listening to this, does make one feel really vulnerable. And especially because in my normal life, listener, so I'm an expert and speaker and clinician and all the other things, right? So I'm used to being the one that holds and helps with other people's challenges. So to actually, I don't often talk about mine. So yeah, so definitely, um, yeah.
Yeah, it's Angie's work revolves around helping people. I suppose it's not just with Baxter, even though you are the back boss. So, Angie, do you think there's a little bit of a taboo still in having therapy? And I mean, like, having therapy and being open about it, but also taking that first step to book a therapy appointment.
Um, I'd say in my generation, there's not a taboo about having therapy, and probably there might be for some people, but they probably are in the minority now. And I'd say most of my friends and peers would be happy to say that they were having therapy. And in fact, we all compare our therapists because let's face it, everyone's got a therapist now. Um, I think where the taboo still lies would be in the older generations and certainly in my parents' generation. Um, because for them, I think whereas for us in our 50s, we've caught up with the idea of mental health and mental well-being and wellness and, the need to reach out to others, like external to your circle for support. I can't ever imagine my mum and dad um, talking to a therapist or even talking to the GP about feeling low, for example, if that was the case. I mean,
Wow.
how does that, you've got parents too. What would they say? So I'd say that emotional evolution journey
Yeah.
maybe starts and ends with my generation.
I agree with that entirely. My parents, I'm one of three girls, and so my dad particularly has become incredibly like switched on to mental health. Like he is like right on John. Like he is very
For
switched on
John,
to it.
shout out to John.
Yeah, like for a 50-something-year-old man, he's very aware of it and incredibly supportive and great at listening. My mum has always been really switched on to it. And if so, she's just become more. So I'm consider myself so lucky to have. They're the same generation as Angie. For context, consider myself very lucky to have two parents who are like totally switched on to it and totally like aware of it and want to support, want to help, want to listen. And it's not a taboo in my household. And then I've got two older sisters to layer on top of that. So I've got quite a strong network of adults around me who are aware of mental health. And that's really fortunate because I know everyone doesn't have that.
So, but the question arises for me. So we're talking as two women. If you were to look at the males of the species, I would probably say that my generation and the men that I know wouldn't talk about having a therapist as openly as women. Would you? I mean, this is a different subject. What do you think for guys of your age?
Oh, I'm quite passionate about men's mental health for various reasons. I think it is getting better, and I do think it's harder for men to open up and talk about mental health and show vulnerability. It's why I spoke about like Joe Marler earlier. I think that's incredible. But it shouldn't be so incredible that a man opens up. It should be normal, But it is it's there is, I think there's less space for men to express vulnerability. There's a fantastic brand, I don't know if you know it, Angie, called Boys Get Sad Too. And well, they have literally, it started by these two guys, and it's a really simple concept. They have a hoodie and a t-shirts brand, and it's just a really simple message on it, and it's Boys Get Sad Too. And that's what it says, and like proceeds go to men's mental health charities. And I think I've got their hoodie and I think it's amazing because I think it's a very simple message that we shouldn't forget that there is less open dialogue for men. And hopefully I think it is getting better, but yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so that's interesting, and that brings me to a point again. I'm quite cynical sometimes, or you might think I'm cynical, but I would say, okay, it's a great message. Men get sad too. Yeah, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Or boys get sad?
Yeah.
But you just talked about their hoodie and their t-shirt. I mean, that's just more merch. That's about
No,
it.
I think it's like stop traffic.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like quite striking. It's quite prominent. I think when you see them out, you're like, oh, and it almost creates this sort of this is like when a brand is more than just a brand, it becomes almost like a bit of a movement. That's kind of their thing they're going with. So no, it sounds like merch, but I think it's their ethos is different.
Okay, that's great to hear. Shout out to the Boys Get Sad Too crew. But I suppose the cynic in me, and the reason I might sound cynical is because when I open social media, all it's full of is people selling me mental health wellness, right?
Yeah.
And again, working in this sector, I get bombarded with more and more stuff, ways to improve your mental health. And I've always find it a bit ironic that, social media is full of trying to make my mental health better when all the evidence suggests that it's social media that's killing our mental health in the first place.
I have thoughts on this because I, in many ways, agree. When I was struggling with my mental health, first thing I did was like delete social media.
So when you weren't in such a great place, you stopped and uninstalled all your social media. Why? How is it making you feel?
I think comparison. I think you end up just doom scrolling. You can distract. You can spend loads of time on it that you don't need to, and it just doesn't add. I don't feel like it added any value to my life. I've now reevaluated it.
And do you, with your friends, given that everyone really feels that comparative, pressure, do you ever talk about that?
I do with certain friends. Some friends I don't. I think it depends. Like some friends, but I do think there definitely is a bit of a pressure in this generation. I now just use social media for work, and that's a lot healthier. I use it for like the work I do and turn it off in the evening, and now I enjoy it more. Do you think, Angie, then, when it comes to all these like TikTok therapists and trends, have you seen a TikTok therapist or like an Insta therapist?
Yeah, I've seen a few of the Insta therapists, and I think some of them are excellent. So there's a lady called Dr. Julie, and she started in COVID, and she's a psychologist, and she posts really interesting memes and little reels that really, really cut to the heart of different issues. So I think there is some really good stuff out there. I think also there's a whole crock of not so good stuff.
Well, social media is built on trends. So it can get itself in a bit of a tangle, can't it? Because like if you think about it, it's like, oh, this is the trending thing to help your mind now, or eat this way, or we should all be doing Pilates and run clubs and like Jesus, what is the right way? I thought a few years ago I was meant to be like bodybuilding and doing overnight oats. And like, now you need to do this and this. It becomes totally trend based that we lose a bit of sincerity.
Which social media influencers do you like in the mental health space?
I love I watch these two YouTubers called Cinema Therapy, and it's this film buff and then an actual licensed therapist, and they watch rom-coms or like movies and then go at it from a therapist's perspective. So they do like When Harry Met Sally or like Bridget Jones, and they're like, what's Bridget's experiencing here is a little bit of trauma from her past relationship. And it's actually, I have found it utterly fascinating and quite helpful. So I recommend, they even do Disney.
No, we're gonna have to do a watch party of that. We're gonna have to do a watch party of that. So though, this makes me just think that in your generation, there's a constant pressure to do work on yourself. Do you feel that? In all aspects, right? From physical, eating protein, taking creatine, all the way through to the mental. Morning routines, morning routines, sleep routines, everything in between.
I think it feels like a pressure. I think you just basically have to paddle your own canoe and mind your own business. When I was at drama school, I used to get really, not you, Angie, I mean, but like in for yourself. When I was at drama school, I used to like flood my social media with all this self, do this to be better, and do this, and God, it just made me feel really overwhelmed. So now I'm like, no, just do what works for you, and what works for you will work for you. What won't. I think it's overwhelming.
So pull away from the social media. The other thing that I see in the younger generations, and obviously I say this partly as a mum and seeing all the other, young people that I see coming in and out of my house, is a sense that there's sometimes too much navel gazing.
I don't know what navel gazing is.
Okay, so it's not nasal gazing because you can't look up your own nose, but it's navel gazing as in introspection. So looking at your navel, just constantly thinking, bringing yourself inwards and focusing on yourself. So navel gazing.
Interesting.
And I suppose what I see is any issue that comes up in school, in work, in the world, this constant sense of needing to poke it, to look at it, to look at it, to look at it, to talk about it, to text about it, to post about it. And I'm not sure if that's entirely healthy. And so, because introspection for me is different to insight.
Okay. Expand.
Well, introspection and navel gazing to me would be the constant picking at something. So, I don't know if it's a friendship that's not working or, someone said something that they shouldn't have said and just like picking it and what does everyone think and da 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 da. And I don't think that adds anything to the stress of the situation. And in fact, I think it just inflames things. Whereas I don't know, what do you think? Or as opposed to stepping back from a situation and looking at it and thinking about it quietly.
I agree. I think that sometimes you just need to let things be, and sometimes you just have a bit of an eggy moment, and you just need to move on from it. But I do think, so, and then there's other moments that you need to maybe unpick and understand why that happened, and you need to just, I think, decide what are the formative moments that you need to dig a bit deeper on, and sometimes also let things go.
So my question would be, do you feel you have the skills to find insight? Or is that something that comes with years and experience?
Years and age, because I think I'm getting better at it now, but I wouldn't have said that a few years ago. What do you feel that?
I think I've definitely got better with it for myself. I think maybe I hope that as a mum, um, that me showing my children how I apply that insight will help them learn the skills earlier than I did. And I think some of that is, the being able to talk about stress and issues and mental health openly.
Well, super quick, if you don't mind me asking, do you remember an age or a point in your life where you think, oh yeah, this is when I really started working on my mental health and becoming aware of it?
One of my values is honesty, I suppose. So, yeah, well, I had a tough time when I was working in the bank. We were dealing with big amounts of money, big decisions, tricky personalities. And then leading out of that, I had a bit of a challenge um, staying pregnant. So I had a few miscarriages and bits of surgery. And again, that was, all of these, I think, you get tempered, don't you, by the things that burn you. Like, that's a terror. I've described that metaphor, whatever, very badly. But, the things that are tricky, they help you realize who you are. And yeah, so all of those things. And then a little bit of postnatal depression thrown in for good mix. Um, and I suppose for me, though, the philosophical, spiritual practice has definitely helped to ground me and to be open and just to notice. Actually, it's awareness. It always comes down. I think for me, everything comes down to awareness of noticing how you feel, right? Rather than, just letting the fluff and the froth at the top drag you along, to stop can come back and notice how you feel. And really, for me, that's yoga. So that deep yoga practice, forget all the acrobatics, forget all the other stuff, but the showing up and practicing yoga. Maybe we talk about that another time. That's what's done it together for me more than anything else.
Being introspective. No, thanks for sharing that, Angie. That was really lovely.
And so, thank you. And so that allows you, so not being introspective, to having awareness and then being able to stop, to step back, and rather than just going down the hole of how I feel, to step back and look at it in the round and then to take insights from it, if that makes sense.
See it, be aware of it, and then take from it what you kind of need.
Yeah, to step back and look at the situation, and even to step back and look at it from as if it was someone else. I think that's always can always helpful, because actually we give
we're looking at your situation with somebody else and like an outside
view.
Angie, what would be your one piece of advice?
So over the years, I often find myself coming back to this tiny little laminated square. I'll take a picture of it and we can post it on the socials. And it was given to my big son, Roshan, when he was probably at the end of primary school. And it's the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And I think from a sort of, dealing with the ups and downs, the vicissitudes of life, that is probably a good few lines to keep in mind.
I think it's beautiful. And I love the fact that you kept it all these years. I think for me, in recent times, I've very much felt like I need to have it all together. And I think I've always had a little bit of that. And I've always set very high expectations for myself. And I think in the last year, I've really worked on just the idea of acceptance, like you said, accepting what comes my way and accepting the circumstances and the cards you're dealt, and just trying to kind of live in the moment a bit more and enjoy the beauty of things a bit more. I recommend everyone to go watch About Time, the Richard Curtis movie. The whole mindset of it is my favourite movie in the world. In my whole mindset is just enjoy the moment.
Enjoy the moment. Love that. Love that. So, Annie, it's that time of the podcast. What's your too young, too old moment this week?
All right, mine is that I was featured on an Ocado Instagram. Woo!
Hey. Okay, so Annie was on an Ocado Instagram post through her work with Fentimans, but how did that make you feel?
I felt absolutely elated. I did a happy dance all around the house, and it reminded me of just being like a little kid, and I felt really young because I was like, oh my gosh! And I wasn't very
squealing. Did you do squealing?
No business professional around here. Angie, what's your too young, too old moment?
I had a too old moment this week at the weekend. Some of you might remember there was a clip of a chap in Richmond Park chasing his Labrador. Fenton. I took Jessie to Hyde Park and I was chatting with a friend and wasn't paying attention to where she was. Jessie's the dog, by the way. And she decided to run after the geese. And it was Saturday. It was a sunny day. There were 100 million tourists in Hyde Park. And Jessie had red mist descended for about 2 or 3 minutes. It felt like an hour, and I was herring around chasing her, going, Fenton, Jessie, come back. And she wasn't listening, and I felt super old and really embarrassed.
It's well rare of you, Angie.
Really embarrassed. Jessie! Felt like a right old lady. And she was so, the bit that made me feel old is that she was so fast I couldn't catch her.
Jesse's got speed.
So, as we wrap up this episode, thanks to our wonderful sponsors, Wilfred's, who have a non-alcoholic spritz that you can use and drink anytime you need it. Sometimes, when we're feeling low, we haven't talked about it today, but there's this natural habit that we all have to try and self-medicate. Just remember, if you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink alcohol. There's some fabulous alternatives out there, and Wilfred's is definitely one of them.
They are reinventing the spritz. It's a non-alcoholic aperitif. You can have it with tonic water, ginger ale, however you like. Check out the Wilfred's Instagram for more recipes.
Great. So, Annie, what's our takeaway from today? Our takeaway of the whole thing, I think we could probably say it all together. We could synchronise.
You ready?
Hang it, yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Do your best,
but
forget
the rest.
We're going to have to work on that a bit. But
do your best, forget the rest.
Do your best, forget the rest. And if you haven't been listening from the start, this is one of the sayings of the Swami that I follow, the monk. I'll talk about her another time, but she gives this as her number one piece of advice for living an easeful life. Do your best.
Forget the rest. Thank you so much for listening. This was a little bit of a more vulnerable episode for us. So we really hope that you feel like you've got to know us a little bit more. And if you found this at all helpful, thank you very much. There is, of course, resources and many, many helplines that you can contact, including the Samaritans, the NHS, BEAT. There's lots of different amazing places and organisations if you have felt affected by anything brought up in today's episode.
We look forward to welcoming you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.